Hey, guys and gals, welcome back to Watch Your Six. I'm Jason Edwards. We're delighted to have you on our podcast. With the current market environment, we're getting a lot of different questions, and people are showing a lot of nerves and are concerned about a lot of different investment strategies. So we're really trying to dive into some basic things that can protect you against what we see periodically in short periods of time. Right now, we're experiencing what we call a market correction. Now, keep in mind, there's a big difference between a market correction and a market crash. A market correction traditionally only drops about anywhere from 10 to 18, 20%. And here's the interesting thing about market correction. If you go all the way back to the 80s, you can track this. Most market corrections, the longest one in history, didn't last more than 4 months. So while market corrections seem a little scary, they're not very painful. If you hold tight, if you maintain your investment tactic and don't blink, in a very short window of time, you're traditionally made whole. Now, a market crash is a whole nother conversation. So with a market crash, we have a scenario that the market drops dramatically in a short window, typically a day to a couple of weeks, and it drops well below 20%. So, you think about the largest market crash we had in the last 20 years, you're looking at '08, market dropped 42%. That was dramatic. Now, those market crashes take substantially longer to recover, and those are situations that you want to keep in mind because there are a distinct difference between the two. A market crash traditionally also is impacted by something severe in the economy. So we have an economic downturn, we've got a contraction in a particular sector, like for example, real estate, oil, or gold. We have those things that have been on the horizon for a while, then eventually the bubble just bursts. A market correction could be a sign of one or two areas throughout the whole economy that needed a little bit of adjustment. Or maybe the market was doing so well that some of those stock prices were a little bit high in price, so therefore it sort of trims the fat. So there's a big difference, and we want to put those in perspective because when a market correction occurs, it's not the time to run to the hills. In fact, many times you'll find incredible opportunities because you're looking at some things going on sale or reducing in market prices. Now, one of the best things you can do when it comes to these kind of environments, and it's critical in investing, is use two basic tactics. There's two traditional tactics that we try to recommend with everyone's portfolio, and it's talked a lot, but very few actually utilize it. One is called DCA, or dollar cost averaging. So think about it this way. It's like putting that nickel you used to do when you were a kid in the piggy bank every week. You're putting money in the bank, you're putting money in the bank. And all of a sudden, over time, you look at the piggy bank and what happens? Well, there's a fairly large, robust amount of cash. Well, the same tactic works with investing. If stock prices are going up and going down, going up and going down, but you're putting money in every month, you're buying those prices at different price points. So what happens is when that same stock you bought at $10 goes down to $5, you're actually buying more of that stock. So it's almost like you're buying that stock on sale. Why is that beneficial? Well, that minimizes the average price per share, and that's critical. So you're not as worried when your stock prices drop because you bought them earlier at a cheaper price, and then when the stock prices go up, your average price per share has gone down. So it's a great way to minimize the risk in a portfolio. And that's something that many people don't do. What's critical there is you have to set that up traditionally electronically. That's the ideal scenario. Have some type of system set up, maybe an EFT or ACH, where every month you're putting in $100, $200, $1,000, whatever the amount is that you can afford. Traditionally, we'll recommend what we call surplus income. So if you look at your bills and say, well, every month I've got $5,000 worth of bills, I make $4,000 extra a month, maybe I can save that $4,000. And that will help compound the potential for growth. It also gives you peace of mind because when you buy that stock that went down to 5 and then it comes roaring back to 20, well, you may have bought 5 to 10 more than you bought before because the price was lower. So dollar cost averaging, or DCA, should be a critical part of your investment tactic. Now, another great resource is called diversification. You hear it all the time. People say, are you diversified? Are you diversified? And what's funny is people say they're diversified. You look at their portfolio, and what they did is they bought a mutual fund from 5 different mutual fund companies. But that's not really diversification, because when you drill down on the mutual funds, let's say they bought, or the companies, you'll find that those companies or mutual funds are actually all in the same sector or industry, or they provide resources that are redundant. So you want to make sure that when you're looking at your portfolio, or if your financial team's looking at your portfolio, that they drill down, especially when you're working with ETFs or mutual funds. You want to make sure that the holdings in those mutual funds or ETFs aren't redundant. Just because one fund is managed by one company and one fund's managed by another company doesn't mean you're diversified. And when you talk about diversification, one says large cap, one says large cap value, still you could have the same companies. So diversification is really the ability to spread your risk. The likelihood of all sectors, all companies, all going down at the same time is 0 to none in most cases. So by diversifying, what you're doing is you're making sure that while one boat may be sinking, the other boats are rising. So it helps offset those losses, and it gives you the chance to make money in any kind of market. Great example is when you look at some of the bubbles that we've had in the past and the market corrections. Those market crashes were sector specific. So for example, in the 90s, we had the tech bubble. Well, while the tech bubble was imploding, do you think there was other areas that money is being made? Absolutely. So when you diversify properly, you have the ability to hedge against some of that risk. Now, some of the great tactics are what they call counter-cyclical or in defensive positioning, which are designed to do better when a market starts to get a little bit soft or we start to see the possibility of a bear market. And the same is true when you start to see the possibility of a bull market. There are portfolios that are a little bit more aggressive or growth driven. So when you look in your portfolio, ask yourself, how am I set up? Am I diversified enough that I have parts of the market that can be protected if we have a bear market, which is a very, very hard market to invest in, and it's a little bit of a contraction, almost like a bear going to sleep, being very, very conservative? Or do I have a bull market where the market's on a fire and I'm looking at areas where these portfolios are going to grow dramatically, which gives me great potential for growth? Those are things that you have to inherently look. And that's where watching your six is so critical, because if you have an investment firm properly look at your overall investment mix, they're going to look at things that you may not have thought about. They're going to look at strategies and maybe back test those strategies to see what are the investment risks in this portfolio. What are the inherent things that that client has not seen? And that's the critical part about having a team. The dollar cost average is another place that you want to look at, because sometimes we're not honest with ourselves when it comes to our spending, but when you sit down with someone who's not emotionally attached and they say, well, looking at your bills, you really only need about this amount of money to pay all your bills and have some money for vacation, but you have a propensity maybe to spend more, or maybe we're not necessarily controlling our spending properly. Well, having someone to look at the spending strategies and the way you look at money is critical to being successful. If you're opening up a small business, again, another great example. Having someone to evaluate the risk associated with that investment. Whether you know it or not, investing in your company is no different than investing in another company. And unfortunately, sometimes when it comes to investing in our own business, we don't do our due diligence. We don't look at it honestly and say, is this viable? Will it make money? What is the risk to me? What's the default risk? How much could I possibly lose? How much do I need to start? I can't tell you how many times I've met with company owners or entrepreneurs and they have a fantastic idea, but you know what they lack? Liquidity. But inevitably what they'll do is they'll try to force the scenario and create an environment where they are cash poor. And that does nothing but compound the deficiency or problem they have. So a lot of this risk that comes associated with investment or success can be minimized if you do proper planning. And as we said in the show, there are two key components that you could really utilize. One is diversification, and another one is dollar cost averaging. So when you're sitting down and you're trying to build an investment, or when you're looking at your future financially, those are parts of the puzzle that have to fit in. If you don't fit those in, what will happen is you'll make holes in your investment tactic, which will then make you susceptible to losses. And then what will happen, and it's a snowball effect, I've seen it over and over, is you'll experience a dramatic loss in a market correction, and you'll blame the market. And you'll say, man, I don't invest anymore, I lost my shirt. Well, was it the market's fault? Or was it maybe your lack of following through on some of the basic tactics that your team should have provided you with, or your denial on using those tactics that impacted your growth? I could say, for example, I'm joining the gym and I'm going to work out every day and lose weight because I have high cholesterol. But I join the gym and don't work out every day, and then 6 months later I do my labs and the doc says, hey, your cholesterol's high. Do I blame the gym, or do I blame the fact that I didn't implement the tactics or tools I had? Same thing applies with investing. So again, be honest with yourself, get a good team around you, have them look at your portfolio and or estate, and look at the holes that you might have. Look at the vulnerability that you might be exposed to. Those would be critical parts to being successful in building wealth. So We hope you come back next week for our next podcast. We look forward to having you here. We're really excited about some of these topics. We're going to get into some specific topics next week in the upcoming podcast on investment tactics and sectors that you might want to look at. How you can mitigate risk as it relates to estate planning and transfer of wealth to your family. Also things you might want to do for your kids when it comes to building assets that you could put away for your kids and do it in such a way. And look at the different tactics that are out there. There are a lot of different plans, but each tactic has its pros and cons. So we want to make sure you're educated on that. So tune in next week. I'm Jason Edwards. Thanks for watching your six.